an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the lives of Christopher Chant, chapters 15, 16, and 17. In these chapters, unexpectedly, the goddess winds up in our world. Well, I guess this isn't even our world. In Christopher's world. And she asks to be called Millie. And I realize, like a dum-dum, that this is the woman he winds up married to in the later book. And I totally didn't even put it together that the little girl in the books is called Millie and that his wife is later called Millie. And that was a very likely dot to connect. My bad. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Thank you so much to Patricia for commissioning this episode. I have just been really enjoying this story. So let's start off with our chapter 15 because there is a lot to talk about here. The goddess is annoyed because she has started to figure some shit out. And guys, this was like what I sort of suggested was like kind of my theory on what was going to happen, but I just didn't really want to think that's what she was setting up because it was so brutal. At the same time, this is a writer who, in no uncertain terms, lets us know that our protagonist was wandering around carrying the butchered parts of like captured and slaughtered mermaids. So I don't know why I thought that the goddess like being killed after a certain point was off the table, because dark is certainly not something that Diana Wynne-Jones shies away from. But I just didn't want to think about it. So it starts off with him getting to her room, and she is trying to explain to me because he says, when she says, like, I need your help, he replies with something that's like, I mean, I feel the same way because we're both shut up in this place and we're both in this tunnel. And she says, I don't know that I'm in a tunnel. She's like, I kind of feel like it's maybe a dead end. And he doesn't understand really what she means. I think that somewhere in his gut, once it really comes to the question, I think he suspects the same thing that I did. But like me, he just didn't want to think that was even on the table. But she's talking to him about her concerns about nobody ever actually answering her question when she asks what's going to happen to her. They keep on changing the subject or just sort of putting her off and telling her not to worry about it. And, this is one of those things where by the time somebody is old enough and aware enough to start asking these kinds of questions, that's when it's time to replace them. And they honestly wait a little bit longer than I would have thought, because they start talking about finding another living goddess after she sees the portent. But really, once she started asking this stuff, they should have already been, low-key worried. But yeah, she says, poor Bethy, she's going to have kittens again. I wish she wouldn't keep on having them. It wears her out. So her little cat, Bethy, winds up being sort of the sacrifice to this portent, which really broke my heart a little bit. But out of it comes an adorable little kitten, which I feel like is meant to be a bit of an allegory to her new life. Bethy, it's symbolism, right? Bethy is worn out by doing this thing that is sort of just happens to her. She doesn't really have any control over it over and over again. And that's really where the goddess is as well. And so the birth of this kitten is like a second chance. So she's asking him how he manages to travel between worlds, asks him like about how difficult it is, how he finds his way, and starts to really get to the point where she's hinting heavily, and he's still not really picking up on it because it's so out of the question to Christopher that she would want to bail completely, that he's just not like hearing the clear question until she finally just straight up is like, I need you to take me where you go. And it's like kind of, you know, I feel like he has the right sort of questions about it. It's kind of funny. That's the only thing that I can say that I sometimes have a problem with in Diana Wynne Jones's writing is that Christopher can be really fucking dense when it comes to stuff that seems increasingly obvious to the point of almost comic, like beating him over the head. But then there are things that I hadn't thought of that he puts together, and I don't really buy it every time. But he sort of theorizes that maybe he's only able to travel this way because he has multiple lives, and that if she doesn't and tries to leave here, she'll die. Which it turns out to not really work that way, but I feel like that's a valid theory. And he's also basically like, you're just going to come into my world and not have any money and not have anywhere to stay. Like, what are you even going to do? To which she essentially is like, you know, I'm going to die if I stay where I am. Who cares if I don't have any money? I'll be alive and I'll figure it out. And she doesn't exactly tell him once she gets there later on, I'm jumping ahead a little, what she's going to do to earn money, but she keeps assuring him that she has her ways. And I guess we'll see what those are. But before they've like completely figured out what happens to her, she's talking about how she has done research and he like thinks that maybe she gets made into a priestess. And she says that she went through and read all the records and none of the priestesses were ever goddesses. He says, I think you just get shoved out of the temple to go home. But you must be able to use your gifts to find out for certain. And she is immediately like astronomically emotional. And it becomes really clear in a moment that she is doing this on purpose to drive him back into the wall, because she recognizes that whenever she starts to throw a fit like this, he leaves. And she has set a bit of a trap for him. So yeah, she gets up, she's stamping her feet, she's screaming at him, she's shaking her bracelets at him. All of her people are coming running, and she knows that he's going to want to jump up and get out before they come into the room. And when he backs into the wall, he gets stuck. And he is stuck, like, she winds up lightening up on this a little bit later so that he can get a bit more comfortable. But at the moment that he is stuck now, it is super duper awkward. And he is like really kind of in pain. And part of his face is out of the wall on one side, part of his butt's through the wall on the other side. And he's just like, you know, a moment away from being discovered. He winds up casting invisibility over himself so that the other people don't see. And she says, there's no point in looking invisible. Everyone here has witch sight, even if you don't. And this comes up later because the witch sight is the thing where he was trying to show, he was trying to see his tutor's hand, which he had like apparently made to look like a lion's paw. And he could not see it. And he has thought that he doesn't have witch sight because of this. But then later, when he sees, like, when she mentions the slit in the protective spells that nobody else has, like, patched up yet, which keeps surprising him, she calls his ability to see that little slit witch sight. And he's very startled because he didn't think that that's what that was. And it's sort of I'm very curious to see as this unfolds a little bit more what the deal is with that, because if he is able to see that slit and nobody else really seems to be able to, And if he wasn't able to see the thing that his tutor was trying to show him that was supposed to be him practicing witch sight, it feels like he must have a slightly different version of it, or I don't know what. Or they call it something different, but I don't know. It seems like they mean the same thing here when they're talking about it. So anyway, I'm just very curious about that. And I'm trying to remember exactly what it was with his tutor, because I feel like he was trying to show him a lion's paw and all he could see was his regular hand. But it might have been the opposite, that he was trying to show him his hand and all he could see was a lion paw. And he was meant to like sort of force past that illusion and actually see his hand again. But I don't remember exactly how that went. But anyway, she says that he's, she's going to lighten things up on this spell, let him get himself into a position that's a little bit more comfortable. But he is super, super angry at her. And he, when she asks him to take her into his world, he refuses, and she is not interested in letting him go. And, he'll probably just leave and never come back, is her theory, which I'm not really sure she's wrong about. So he cursed himself for thinking the goddess was sympathetic. She was just as selfish and ruthless as everyone else he knew. He squirmed and struggled and heaved to get out of the wall, but since he had not the first idea what had gone into the spell, it held him as fast as ever. The worst of it was that now the temple had woken up from its midday sleep. It was decidedly a busy place. Behind him, through the wall, Christopher could hear a crowd of people in the hot yard, counting the cats and feeding them. Mixed with those sounds was a female voice barking orders and the sound of armor clashing and spear butts thumping on the ground. Christopher began to be terribly afraid that his invisible backside was sticking out of the wall into that yard. He kept imagining a spear plunging into him there, and he squirmed and squidged and pulled himself in to make sure that it was not. He was not sure which he dreaded most, the feeling of a spear driving into him, or what Gabriel would do if he lost another life. So he winds up stuck here for quite a while, and finally comes up with this idea to try and... what's the word I want? Petition a portent from Asheth. And the goddess has kind of not really thought about doing it the way that he suggests, because he's like, you can ask something specific. You can put a time limit on it so that if you don't get the sign, you'll know it and you won't just go on waiting for it. And he does a couple of different things trying to threaten her into letting him go. He tries to say that he'll yell and give her away. And she's just sort of like, yeah, okay, go ahead then. You're the one who's all worried about losing another one of your lives, and completely calls his bluff, which he does not do. And he thinks about blowing up the wall that he's trapped in. But there are a few things keeping him from doing that. First of all, it would be using magic against a woman, which is a thing that his father instructed him was really just not gentlemanly. And we know that he did use magic against his mother that one time, but it was, I feel, kind of an extenuating circumstance, because she was kind of low-key. Trying to hurt him, maybe a little bit of an extreme way to do it, but she was definitely taking his free will away. But I guess so is the goddess. So... I don't feel like it would be out of the question for him to do that here. And then I'm trying to see because there were a couple of reasons. Also, just blowing up the wall would be something that it would be pretty much impossible to explain. And the likelihood of him being caught and losing another life is pretty high if he does that again. And I'm trying to find the moment. 5 minutes later, the goddess strode back. Done it. She didn't want to tell me I had to bully her, but I told her to take her very stupid face off and stop trying to fool me, and she gave in. Which, that's pretty fun. I really enjoy that. So, okay, here it is. Midnight then, he said, sighing a bit, and you're to let me go then, or I'll summon a whirlwind, set everything on fire, and take the roof off the temple. During those 3 hours, he kept wondering why he did not do that at once. It was only partly that he did not want to lose another life. He felt a sort of duty to wait and set the goddess's mind at rest. He had started her worrying by making that remark, and before that he had made her discontented by bringing her those school stories. He had a lot of fellow feeling for her in her strange, lonely life. And of course, Papa had told him that you did not use magic against a lady. Somehow, all these things combined to keep Christopher sagging in a half-sitting way in the wall, patiently waiting for midnight. So, eventually, her cat turns up dead. It is really, like, it just made me so sad. It really did. And the kitten is on top of the cat, and she gets a little distracted by that for a second, but then when she realizes that Bethy is dead, and that means that she is going to die, she sets up a wailing, and everybody winds up coming to see what's going on with her, and at the same time, she touches him with her silver and sends him back into his body. And when he arrives back into his body, his guardian, Gabriel, is sitting there and is very, very aware of what the fuck was just going on. He knows precisely. She says that he first of all says, so you've been spirit traveling, and I guess you do that a lot. And I am also guessing this is what's going on with you losing your lives so quickly. There was nothing Christopher could do but explain. He rather wished he could have died instead. Losing a life was nothing compared with the way Gabriel looked at him. The Temple of Asheth, Gabriel said, you foolish boy. Asheth is one of the most vicious and vengeful goddesses in the related worlds. Her military arm has been known to pursue people across worlds and over many years on far slighter grounds than you have given her. Thank goodness you refrained from blowing a hole in her temple, and I'm relieved that you at least had the sense to leave the living Asheth to her fate. Her fate? They weren't really going to kill her off, were they? Of course they will, Gabriel said in his calmest and driest way. That was the meaning of the portent. The older goddess dies when the new living Asheth is chosen. The theory, I believe, is that the older one will enrich the power of the deity. This one must be particularly valuable to them, as she seems to be quite an enchantress in her own right. How can you be so calm about it? She's only got one life. Can't you do something to help her? My good Christopher, said Gabriel, there are, over all the series of all the related worlds, more than 100 worlds, and in more than half of them, there are practices which horrify any civilized person. If I were to expend my time and sympathy on these, I would have none left over to do what I am paid to do, which is to prevent the misuse of magic here. This is why I must take action over you. So he decides at this point, Gabriel that is, to take away some of Christopher's, to take away his extra life. He says, you must have lost your other life the last time you went spirit traveling. You are definitely one short again. So he has only 2 left, right? I believe. And Gabriel wants to take the 1 extra and leave Christopher with just the 1 on him? Or does he take both and Christopher just has the 1 that he has? I'm trying to find them. Let's see. Nobody should lose lives at the rate you do. I don't do it just to annoy you, if that's what you think. He stalked silently through the corridors, with Christopher half running to keep up. What had become of his 6th life, Christopher wondered, with what bit of his mind was not taken up with terror. He was inclined to think that Gabriel had miscounted. So he goes into this office, and Miss Rosalie and Dr. Simonson are in there. And Gabriel tells him, this is the severe step I warned you of after your fire. I intend to remove your 9th life from you without harming it or you. Afterwards, I shall put it in the castle safe under 9 charms that only I can unlock. Since you will then only be able to have that life by coming to me and asking me to unlock those 9 charms, this might induce you to be more careful with the 2 lives you will have left. So yeah, he's only taking the 1, but I really wonder how that works, because he's like, since you'll have to come to me and ask me to unlock it, how would he do that if he is dead? I mean, I don't really understand how that would work. Does he come to him as a ghost? Is there like a weird in-between that would occur if his life was being kept from him but did exist? I wonder. Taking a life out intact is something only Gabriel knows how to do, Miss Rosalie said proudly. Dr. Simonson, to Christopher's surprise, seemed to be trying to be kind. He said, "These spells are only for hygiene. Don't look so alarmed. Lie down on this couch now. I promise you it won't hurt a bit." Just what the dentist said, Christopher thought as he quakingly lay down. The reason Frederick Parkinson is here and not patrolling the world edge as he should be is to make sure that you do not spirit travel while your life is being detached. That would put you in extreme peril, Christopher, so please try to remain in this world while we work. And we find out later that he kept trying to spirit travel. It's something that he is not actually like totally in control of, it feels. And Frederick Parkinson just kept on having to pull him back and stop him and pull him back. Like it was a lot of work. And they have managed to extract the life from him, and everybody, it has this sort of like extremely relieved attitude that tips Christopher off to the fact they've never actually done this before. Like, they all treat it as if this is a very serious procedure, but something that they're familiar with. And obviously, this is the first time that they have ever done it. And the fact that it went as well as it did, they all expected it to work, but they just, weren't totally sure. And they're all asking how he's feeling. Gabriel, in particular, is very anxious about it. And he has this sort of itchy feeling inside, is the way it's described, which is wild. And I can't really wrap my head around what that means. But later on, that feeling seems to be gone. So it's sort of like he heals up. Frederick, would you put Christopher to bed and tell the housekeeper that he's ready for that nourishing meal now? Everyone was so nervous and concerned about him that Christopher realized no one had ever tried to take someone's spare life before. He ate more chicken and cream puffs than he could hold, and Frederick sat by him while he ate and went on sitting by him all evening. Christopher did not know which irritated him most, Frederick or the itch deep down inside him. He went to sleep early in order to get rid of both. So he gets out of bed in the middle of the night, thinking that he is going to be able to spirit travel after all, and thinking that the gap in the spells that allows him to spirit travel is probably mended. And he finds that it isn't, and he's sort of shocked by that, and shocked at the fact that nobody has figured out this was how he managed to do it. And he's about to try and get through the split, and he looks back, and the body that he has left behind has a sort of like airy, like translucent look, the way that Tacroy does when he is in, like, before Christopher is able to sort of make him become more solid and firm. He really did have only 2 lives left now. The last life was locked away in the castle safe, and there was no way he could use it without Gabriel's permission. Hating Gabriel more than ever, he went back to bed. Yeah, come on, Christopher, what are you doing? Like, I get it. I do get wanting to get out of here, but seriously, dude, you've died so many times. I can't believe that you're still fucking playing this game. Like, oh my God. Flavian brought Christopher his breakfast in the morning. Are you all right for lessons today? I thought we could take it easy. I had a fairly heavy day yesterday. And he, like, Christopher, for his part, is kind of annoyed at the fact that he is being so closely watched by everyone, and that there's this sort of like ticking time bomb vibe with the way they're treating him. But he tries to make Flavian happy and goes and does his lessons the way that he is meant to. And then they get interrupted by the capture of one of the Wraiths. It's actually, there's more than one person captured here. Miss Rosalie appeared struggling to keep hold of an angry old woman who was trying to hit her over the head with a violin. So this is the person that put Tacroy into the trances, I guess, which is just delightful to me that this woman is trying to brain people with her fucking instrument. 2 policemen materialized behind her. They were carrying someone between them. And it turns out that this is Tacroy, who goes by the name Mordecai Roberts in the real world. I really wonder where he gets Tacroy from for use of, for his spirit self. I wonder where that comes from. And Christopher is assuming at this point with first of all, hilariously, this is the moment in which Christopher figures out what the fuck his uncle was doing. And it takes still so long for him to cotton on. Like, honestly. So this was what Uncle Ralph's experiments really were. Oh no, he thought, let it all be a mistake. He kept hearing Miss Rosalie's voice saying, but Gabriel, they had actually butchered a whole tribe of mermaids. And his mind kept going to those fishy bundles he had loaded on the horseless carriage in Series 5, and then to the silly ladies who had thought he was something called a Clist offer. He told himself that those fishy bundles had not been bundles of mermaid. It was all some terrible mistake. But then he thought of the way Tacroy had tried to warn him off, not only the time the dragon came, but several times before that, and knew it was no mistake. He felt sick. So yeah, it's taken him a minute, but now he's finally getting the picture, and he assumes that Tacroy is going to give him up, and that all of this is going to come out, and that he will be deemed unfit to be Chrestomanci, which in its own way would be a relief. But what winds up happening is that Tacroy absolutely does not give him up. He is extremely careful that anytime they ask a question that could potentially loop in even the vaguest theory that he had someone working with him, he denies what they're asserting and gives them another thing, another falsehood to sort of track down and follow so that they get distracted from the original question. And he does not look at Christopher with any sort of recognition at all. And Christopher initially thinks that Tacroy does not recognize him. But it turns out that Tacroy is just really good at this. He's a good actor. And they ask him straight up, why would you do something that was so dangerous and so fucked up, really, frankly, when you have been given a position that was paid well? And all it comes down to is just money, as he puts it. He says, in the early days, the Wraith only operated in Series 12. He couldn't offer me enough to tempt me then. As soon as he expanded into the rest of the related worlds, he offered me anything I cared to ask. I didn't take the offer straight away. I got deeper in by degrees. Extravagance gets a hold on you. So yeah, the garret that he had supposedly been living in Covent Garden is totally not real. He has a lovely flat on Baker Street. And I love the line, extravagance gets a hold on you, because that really does seem to be the way it works. It's like luxury and power are both this way, I feel like, where you gradually begin to expect more and more and try and push it more and more, and until you are living a lifestyle that is so far beyond what you ever thought you would be okay with, or it's not just that you're living it, but that you take for granted that this is the way things should be. And it really, I feel like, is part of why there is so little empathy for the poor, that people do not understand when they are living in a lifestyle in which everything is provided for and they are comfortable. They completely lose touch with what it felt like to not have this stuff. And I'm talking, of course, really specifically about people like Tacroy who gradually get money, rather than people who are born into families that have money, because they don't have any other frame of reference. But there are some people who manage to continually remind themselves where they come from and keep that spirit of humility, of wanting to help other people who are in the same situation. And I really hope that I can be one of those people as I start to get more successful. But I have seen it happen where people who should have a lot more empathy for folks going through a hard time, or folks who have 2 and 3 jobs and still can't make ends meet, they at one time were in that same position, and now you would never know that they were, because they just don't seem to remember. And I wonder sometimes if that's not like a coping mechanism that our minds put in place, because poverty is so tough that our minds are trying to like protect us from that anxiety that comes from it, but who knows? So, they ask him who the Wraith is, and he says that he doesn't know, that, the guy was very careful about protecting his identity. And they keep asking him for different names, and he's like, eventually he starts to give up some names, but it's unclear as of now whether or not those names are anything real, because he lies throughout, so it's really, I don't know whether or not he's being honest or not. Because I don't know any of the names of the people who are like, the only person is Ephicia Bell, which is the last governess, Miss Bell. Other than that and Ralph, I don't know anybody else's names. So he could have given up a bunch of people for real, and I wouldn't be aware of it. I'm basically in the same position as the people questioning him. So yeah, they ask him about the ingenious object of the horseless carriage. And he says it must have taken quite a while to perfect. You can see it had to be fluid enough to cross the world edge, but solid enough so that the people in the other series could load it when it got there. I got the impression that the Wraith had to wait until he'd got the carriage right before he could expand into the related worlds. That's not true, Christopher thought. And I used to load it. He's lying about everything. Several wizards must have worked on that thing. Who were they? Heaven knows. No. Wait a minute. Effie dropped a name. Phelps, was it? Felperin? Gabriel and the policeman exchanged glances, and Flavian muttered, "The Felperin brothers. We've suspected they were crooked for years." Another curious thing, our brief inspection of the carriage shows that it seems at one time to have been almost destroyed by fire. Accident in the workshop, I suppose? Dragon fire, Mordecai, said Dr. Simonson. I recognized it at once. And he kind of laughs and looks around the room again, as if to remind himself that he needs to lie here too. The sight of you all sitting around in judgment brings out the worst in me. I was joking. Yes, it was burned by a dragon objecting to a load of dragon's blood I was collecting in Series 8. It happened about a year ago. I lost the whole load and was nearly too scalded to get back into my own body. We had to suspend operations most of last autumn until the carriage was repaired. If you remember, I reported to you that the Wraiths seemed to have stopped importing then. So that is when Christopher was out of things, because he had started school. And he had the braces in his mouth that kept him from being able to travel initially until the headmistress told him to take them out when he went to sleep. So that's a really tidy little explanation of why things were like called off for a while. And it places the fire at a time far before when Christopher had his encounter with the fire in our world, because Gabriel is smart enough to have put together that Christopher was dying in the worlds between and then dying here. So if the fire, the dragon fire specifically, the timing of that was told in truth, I don't doubt that Gabriel would have started to figure out Christopher is spirit traveling. Christopher keeps dying. Christopher's accidents are timed right along with when Tacroy is telling us that these certain things tended to happen. But Tacroy is smart enough to put a lot of distance between them. And I really have to admire this guy for thinking on his feet the way that he does. Like, this ain't no joke, the way that he manages this. Did you always go out alone? Of course I was alone, said Tacroy. What use would another traveler be? Mind you, I have absolutely no way of knowing how many other carriages the Wraith was sending out. He could have hundreds. And that's nonsense, Christopher thought. Ours was the only one, or they wouldn't have had to stop last autumn when I went to school and forgot. If he had not realized by then that Tacroy was protecting him, he would have known by the end of the morning. The questions went on and on. Tacroy's eyes slid across Christopher over and over again without a trace of recognition, and every time Tacroy's answer should have incriminated Christopher, Tacroy lied, and followed the lie up with a smokescreen of other confessions to take people's minds off the question. And at least twice he nearly jumped up and confessed, but that seemed such a waste of all Tacroy's trouble. I love this, because it could easily be read as, oh, you're using that as an excuse because you don't want to get in trouble. But this is a rare case in which what seems an unlikely excuse, I actually believe. Tacroy has gone to a lot of trouble to frame everything so that Christopher is not implicated. And it doesn't feel like he has anything to gain from that, except that he really doesn't want Christopher in trouble because he feels bad, because he knows Christopher was roped into this with no knowledge of what the fuck he was actually doing. That, he himself was getting paid for what he was doing and managed to set aside quite a tidy sum for himself. But Christopher was getting used and lied to and treated like garbage, and the last thing that he deserves is to be outed this way. And not only that, but if they found out that Tacroy lied about Christopher's involvement, that would mean that they had to second guess everything he told them. And that means that they would continue asking these questions and continue to push him. And I don't get the impression that it's a tough thing to know. I don't get the impression that torture is a thing in this world, but it could be. And I also am not sure whether or not one would think they'd have used spells at this point to force Tacroy to tell the truth. But maybe they would once they realized that he had lied about all of this stuff, and who knows what else would come out at that point. So let's see. So all of this, Christopher is he's starting to get a little bit clammy and nervous about it all. They bring him some sandwiches, which are salmon, and he is just, because of thinking about these poor mermaids that got butchered, the taste of the fish just makes him feel nauseous, and he decides that he is going to leave early, and he gets sort of intercepted because his mother is here, and his mother is with Miss Bell, the last governess. And it turns out that they're trying to get him to come home with her. And finally, Christopher is beginning to see through what's actually happening here. First, Miss Bell is signals for him to create a spell that will keep the listening charms that are doubtless on this room from working, so that they can all talk in actual privacy. And he goes a little bit too hard with it at first and makes everybody deaf and winds up having to fix it. I love the way that he says, it says, he saw that Mama was tapping the side of her face with a puzzled expression. Hastily, he scraped out the middle of the spell so that they could all hear one another inside the deafness. I love that. That's such a weird way to say that, but I think it's so cool and just very tactile in a way. Scraped out the middle of the spell. So his mother tells him there's a cab for the station waiting outside. You're coming back to live with me. Your uncle wants me to be happy, and he says he knows I can't be happy until I've got you. He's quite right, of course. And Christopher is so irritated because, you know, there's this moment I think that we all have in our lives. Christopher has started to understand truly the situation that he's in and the way that he has been taken advantage of and the various ways in which he's been lied to or deceived himself. And so he is looking at this with some irritation from the perspective of someone who knows that if he had been offered this yesterday, this would have been something that would have, made him so happy to be getting out of this fucking place and away from these people and these oppressive spells. But now he knows that his uncle is a ruthless user, that his mother is just kind of a sad little pawn who doesn't really know what's going on. And he is able to see that, even though she's being honest about wanting him with her, he knows that, as soon as he's there, his mother is going to leave him alone with the governess again. And it's just a kind of I feel like a lot of us have this moment in our lives where we see a parent for what they are. And I'm not even talking there's a lot of disdain that people have for therapy in general, where they talk about how we would like to blame our parents for everything. And the thing is that happens because it's a cliche because it's true. The way we are formed often has the most to do with our parents out of anybody. But there is a difference between blaming a parent and simply coming to terms with who your parent actually is. And that is what I feel happens here. Christopher finally sees his mother clearly because it has taken him so long to really understand that she's not a malicious person. She's just sort of clueless and really easy to manipulate, and that she's easily distracted, and that she can mean what she says, even though it says Mama's love for Christopher might be perfectly real. But she had left him to nursery maids and governesses as she would leave him to the last governess as soon as they got to Kensington. So I feel like that's so important, is that you can understand that somebody does love you. You can understand that what they are saying to you, they believe in that moment, and they mean it, and they mean well. But you can also understand that all of that doesn't change the fact that there is a pattern of behavior for them there. And you're not under no obligation to trust their word. You can go by what you have seen from them your entire life and make a judgment call based on that. And there is nothing wrong with doing that. You're not being cruel to them. You are being honest with yourself about the patterns that you have watched for your whole life. And by coming to terms with what people really are, it makes it a lot easier to set boundaries for yourself, because that's a really tricky thing that all of us have to learn to do, is set boundaries. And with parents, it is particularly hard a lot of the time because we feel indebted to them and we feel like we should feel a certain way about them or that we owe them something. And I really like the fact that he sees this and is just listen, I know, you're not lying when you say that you want me with you because you want me, but you're just too stupid to understand that you're being manipulated. And even if I came with you, you'd immediately lose interest. I know you. So all of this combines just to make him so irritated as he realizes what a great opportunity this would have seemed to him that morning. But now it's just, he's so irritated by the fact that they have both been played. And it's kind of funny because he's been played so bad. He's only just figuring all this out now. And he also finds out, Miss Bell says something to him about how your uncle has restored nearly half your mama's fortune. And she says this he's so generous. Meanwhile, Christopher's nearly half? He must be a millionaire several times over by now. What the fuck has he done with the rest of the money I earned? Again, Ralph doesn't realize that Christopher knows perfectly well what the fuck is going on. So they're presenting this like he's being done a favor, though they're treating him the way that they did when he was still a clueless child, desperate for anybody's approval. So anyway, long story short, he tells them that he can't because when the dragon burned me in Series 8, that was my last life but one. Gabriel took my extra life and hid it, and if I leave the castle, I'll die. And he manages to like say this in a way that seems like he really does desperately want to go with them, but just can't. And immediately the governess stands up and is just like, well, I guess we better go then. And I was just like, wow, she just gave up on that shit real easily. So though he knew what both of them were like, he still felt hurt and disillusioned as he watched them through the window, climbing into the cab that was waiting under the cedar trees of the drive. The only person he knew who had not tried to use him was Tacroy, and Tacroy was a criminal and a double-crosser. And so am I, Christopher thought. Now he had finally admitted this to himself, he found he could not bear to go back to the middle drawing room to listen to people asking Tacroy questions. So he goes up to his room, and this is when he runs into the goddess who is sitting on his bed. She is like soaking wet because apparently it was raining in the world between. It's a bad scene. I really loved this because I should have anticipated that she would eventually come into his world, but I just didn't even think of it. And it wasn't until I had finished these chapters and I was making myself something to eat and thinking them over, and all of a sudden realized that she was Millie. And I was like, I can't believe it took me this long to figure this out. Oh my God. So he has to figure out what the fuck to do with her. And what he winds up doing is taking that little like abandoned room and making it into a sort of hideout for her. Thankfully, it's an area that like nobody really goes into often, so he can do this and apparently nobody's really going to notice. But he's also Patricia's here in the chat giving me a little smile emoji. I felt like such an idiot. I swear to God, I was just like, that's so obvious. How did I not figure this out? But he is summoning all this stuff, and I want to read this because I think this is so funny. Christopher began conjuring desperately. He fetched all the cushions from the small saloon. Then on second thought, he knew someone would notice. He sent most of them back and conjured cushions from the large drawing room, the large saloon, the middle saloon, the small drawing room, and anywhere else where he thought there would be nobody to see. Charcoal for the gardener's shed next to fill the brazier. Or brazier, to fill the brazier. Christopher summoned fire for it, almost in too much of a hurry to notice he had got it right for once. He remembered a saucepan and an old kettle by the stables and fetched those. A bucket of water he brought from the pump by the kitchen door. What else? Milk for the kitten. It came in a whole churn, and he had to tip some out into a saucepan and then send the churn back. The trouble was he had no idea where the things were kept in the castle. Teapot. Tea. He had no idea where those came from, and did the goddess drink tea? She would have to. What then? Oh, cup, saucer, plates. He fetched the ones out of the grand cabinet in the dining room. They were quite pretty. She would like those. Then spoon, knife, fork. Of course, none of the silver ones would respond. Christopher fetched what must have been the whole kitchen cutlery drawer with a crash, sorted hastily through it, and then sent it back like the churn. And she would need food. What was in the pantry? So, yeah, he keeps on just bringing things and sending them back when he, like, takes a little bit more than what he's supposed to have taken. And we find out later that the maids definitely notice and are just like, what the fuck is going on? They piece it together that he is starting to be able to use his powers better. But one of the maids finally has to be like, you need to put most of that shit back. Like, come on, get it together. So Flavian comes to see him. And he has to cast a really strong invisibility spell over his room to hide that the goddess is literally standing right there, because Flavian opens the door and Christopher is behind him, coming down from that attic space. And then he tries, as he's talking to Flavian, to transport the goddess into the attic space and get her out of his room. And that works, but unfortunately, the invisibility spell that he placed on his room is still sticking to her. So up where she's at, she has to like be very careful because the kitten that she is taking care of is also invisible. And she's like worried that she's going to step on it, and he can't really take the spell off from where he is. And she manages to do it on her own, which is pretty cool. Like, I like the fact that she keeps on proving to be almost as strong with spells as he is. It's just taking her longer because she is taught very differently than him, you know? Patricia is saying, I thought you would figure it out at the Millie books. It didn't even enter my head. I should have figured it out, but nope, I didn't even think of it. So he manages this, and Flavian asks, let's see, after you left, Mordecai cracked open enough to give us a few names and addresses. We think he was telling the truth. I'd look forward to catching them, except that I can't get over Mordecai being one of them. So he's sort of distracted and doesn't really hear like what Flavian is saying to him, because he's trying to work on this spell of fixing things with the goddess where she is. And at one point, Flavian says that he figures Mordecai's going to prison. And Christopher says, but they'll have to put a special clink around his spirit to stop that getting away, won't they? Christopher said. To his surprise, Flavian exploded. All right, guys, listen. I'm not mad at him. It's a weird spot for him to explode, in my opinion. It doesn't seem like this would be the thing that pushes him. I'm not really sure why it did. I'm guessing maybe the like special clink is maybe particularly cruel, and Christopher talking about it in this like kind of offhand way, the way that he is, because Christopher probably hasn't given thought to what that's actually like, makes him feel like Christopher's being super insensitive. But it just startled me because I thought Christopher was just asking practical questions. And Flavian is friends with this guy that has been taken up. So for him, it's personal. And Christopher just doesn't really get that or understand what it is that he's referencing the way Flavian clearly does. So he goes fucking off. That's just the kind of damn fool, frivolous, unfeeling remark you would make. Of all the hard-hearted, toffee-nosed, superior little beggars I've ever met, you're the worst. Sometimes I don't think you have a soul, just a bundle of worthless lives instead. You seem to think that those 9 lives give you the right to behave like the Lord of creation. That, or there's a stone wall around you. If anyone so much as tries to be friendly, all they get are haughty stares, vague looks, or pure damn rudeness. Goodness knows I've tried. Gabriel's tried. Rosalie's tried. So have all the maids. And they say you don't even notice them. And now you make jokes about poor Mordecai. I've had enough. I'm sick of you. Oh, shit. Oh, shit, Flavian. Like, I love it because you guys, I was saying last coverage when he's trying so hard, clearly, to get Christopher interested and make him happy. And Christopher is just fucking not. And I sympathized with Christopher because I remember being a teenager and being able to see I was being an asshole and just not really being able to help it. But damn, I love this so much. Christopher had no idea that people saw him like this. He was astounded. What's gone wrong with me? He thought. I'm nice, really. When he went to the Anywheres as a small boy, everyone had liked him. Everyone had smiled. Total strangers had given him things. Christopher saw that he had gone on thinking that people only had to see him to like him, and it was only too clear that nobody did. He looked at Flavian, breathing hard and glaring at him. He seemed to have hurt Flavian's feelings badly, and had not thought Flavian had feelings to hurt. And it made it worse somehow that he had not meant to make a joke about Tacroy. Not when Tacroy had just spent the whole day lying on his behalf. He liked Tacroy. The trouble was, he did not dare tell Flavian he did, nor did he dare say that his mind had mostly been on the goddess, so what could he say? I'm sorry, he said. truly sorry." His voice came out wobbly with shock. "I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Not this time, anyway. Really." "Well," said Flavian. The pink in his face died away. He leaned back in his chair, staring. "That's the first time I ever heard you say sorry. Meaning it, that is. I suppose it's some kind of breakthrough." And eventually, Flavian's just like, "All right, I can't do this. You're going to have to see to yourself today. I'm taking the day off. We'll deal with your all of your lessons tomorrow." So he goes and hangs out with Millie at this point, as we're going to call her. He mentions the living a chef, and she's like, "Don't fucking say that name out loud. Like, she can travel. She'll fucking find me. So just don't say it. Don't think it. Nothing." And this is when she says for him to call her Millie. She calls the kitten Proudfoot after the woman who had been looking after her. And she points out the cat has double paws, and she says she has a holy foot. That means she carries the luck of a certain golden deity. When I saw it, I knew it meant I should get here and go to school. At this point, Throgmorton turns up, and he is very excited that Millie is here, and comes and rubs up on her and hangs out with her. And the goddess starts to ask him about what exactly happened to him when she kept him stuck in the wall. And he explains to her about how Gabriel took his lives away, or his life, one of them, and is like safeguarding it. And she's like, "Oh shit, I was in a bad way, but now that I'm here, you're the one who's in a bad way." And she's determined to try and find a way to get it back for him. And he tells her, "I don't know if you can go to school. Like, the boarding schools in your book are very expensive. The uniforms alone are really expensive. You didn't bring anything with you to sell. I don't really know how we can make this happen." And she says, "I came prepared to earn money. I know I will. I have Proudfoot's holy foot as an omen." And he's like, "Okay." And he says, "My idea was to write to Dr. Pawson." "That might help," the goddess agreed. "When Millie's friend Cora Hope Forbes' father broke his neck hunting, she had to borrow her school fees. I do know all about these things, you see." So he summons a pen and ink and spend basically the rest of the day making the whole place homely while they write this letter. They considered what to write to Dr. Pawson, and the goddess made notes about it in slanted, foreign-looking writing. They had not made much progress when the gong sounded distantly for supper. So this is when he has this encounter with the maid and tries very hard to be friendly to her. And she is extremely receptive. Like, this is the kind of thing that I appreciate, because it can be sort of like somebody gives you the cold shoulder for so long that by the time they actually start to act friendly to you, you've gone completely in the other direction and you're not here for it anymore. But she isn't over on that side of things yet. And she's very open with him and talks about him, or talks to him about what's going on with Tacroy, about the old woman with the violin, everything. And he's being held for further questioning. And it turns out that everybody, all of the women in the castle, were basically crushing on Mordecai. He's good looking, he's friendly, and just like a really pleasant person to be around. And all of the women would like kind of make excuses to wind up near where he was at so that they could, make conversation and try and get in with him a little bit. But he, Tacroy, was in love with Miss Rosalie, who is very, very good at cricket, as we remember. So I kind of love that little connection there. It was Mr. Roberts who taught Miss Rosalie to play cricket, but somehow they never could agree. It was said it was because of her that Mr. Roberts got himself sent off on that job in London. She did him a bad turn, did Miss Rosalie. So when she says she did him a bad turn, I wonder, did she agree to get engaged and then take it back, or like I'm just wondering what it was that they disagreed on, because she seems like a generally good sort, so maybe she just disapproved of him doing shady shit, you know? I don't know. So the goddess, meanwhile, is trying to summon this tray of food because he told her she could, because he didn't expect the maid to hang around for so long. So he has to hold it back until finally the maid turns around. And when he lets go, the goddess has amped up the spell to summon it so much that she pulls half of the table with it. And when he goes upstairs, 2/3 of the schoolroom table are sitting on the workbench, and they just burst out fucking laughing. And Christopher is actually having a really good time because she knows about as much magic as he does. Like he has, and it works the same way. So she's running into the same issues that he has when he was learning stuff. And, you know, he's just really enjoying having a companion after being totally alone here. So he asks her to help him with getting Tacroy the fuck out of here. And, you know, let's see where it is. She said it so readily that Christopher realized he would have to tell her why Tacroy was there. If he let her help without telling her what she was in for, he would be as bad as Uncle Ralph. So he tells her everything, and she's like, oh shit. Wow. Okay. Well, that's a lot, but no, we can figure this out. And she starts to like get up and walk out that instant. And he's like, no, oh my God, we need to plan this out. What are you doing? And when he leaves, he finally like puts a fucking spell to keep her in there, because he starts to worry that maybe she's just going to leave and fucking walk around like some sort of imbecile, not understanding how dangerous that would be. And she gets very annoyed by him basically imprisoning her, and is bouncing up and down the milk churn right next to his bed in the morning to let him know that she's like awake and fucking impatient. So he goes up there and tells her that he's going to help her out with setting things right in her room. She boiled the tea, which makes it taste terrible. So he's trying to fix that for her. And then he has to rush back in time for the breakfast tray. And the maid is already there and is a little bit weirded out at the fact that he's like not ready for it. And the table is all messed up because the legs have been put on wrong because of it being split into pieces. So this is when she's like, all right, so are you the one that took the antique cups and stuff? And he's like, yeah, I'm sorry, I'll put them back. And she's like, yeah, you fucking better. They're super duper valuable. Things keep popping in and out all over the place. If you'll take my advice, you'll have everything back in its proper place before 10 o'clock. After Monsieur de Witt and the others leave to catch those thieves, the butler's going to go around checking the whole castle. So she hangs out and eats his toast and marmalade, which is just very familiar, but okay. Her name turned out to be Erica, and she was a valuable source of information, as well as being nice. But Christopher knew he should not have taught the goddess to conjure. He would never keep her a secret at this rate. Then, when Erica had gone and he was free to consider his problems, it dawned on Christopher that he could solve 2 of them at one go. All he had to do was ask Tacroy to take the goddess with him when he escaped. That made it more urgent than ever to get Tacroy free. And that is the end of chapter 17. So this was a very eventful series of chapters, and it was really fun. I have no idea what's going to happen next. But yeah, I've been really enjoying this book. So thank you very much to Patricia for commissioning this. She just wrote Cricket Crush. Cricket Crush. There's something like, at first I think of it as a children's book that's like adorable about 2 crickets having crushes on each other. And then I thought of it, I have a friend who specializes in selling insect-based protein powders and protein bars. And so I'm thinking of crushed crickets, and that's much less adorable. Anyway, with that, I will leave you all. Thank you all so much for listening and for hanging out with me. Thank you again to Patricia for the commission. And I will be seeing you again soon with a new episode. So till then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Unspoiled Network podcast.